I'm going to ask that first group to come on up here. So if Santa Cruz was a creative class community, you want to just come over here so that everybody can see you? Okay, so you just got, a minute or two to report out. Just give the highlights.
Hello. So some of the things that our group came up with was laying fiber for broadband. We need to get really serious about that. And that's for the whole county, not just for the city. We need to improve our permit process, and while the city has done a lot to improve that, it's still based on kind of like the old brick and mortar and retail sort of model, and that we need to look at parking fees for a person who wants to start a one-person shop, seeing our regulation and permit process more than just kind of like the first floor, that we've got to think about the second floor and the people who are working in offices. We need community talking points. We need to improve our ability to tell our story. We do have a creative class, but a lot of people don't know that. We need to brag, and we as a community need to convince ourselves first that we have all of these great things before we can go out and tell the world that we're pretty damn awesome. We need consistent messaging. That's another problem. We have several disparate organizations. One group will say we have a great beach. Another group says we have wonderful wineries. So we need a consistent message that gets all of that information out, which is difficult. We were thinking we could tie in perhaps drinking wine, which leads to the creative class. So that could be one of our messages. And also, we just wanted to mention, we thought that one way to maybe do this is have a volunteer group of folks that would form a marketing board for community messaging. The other idea is more transitional support for people who graduated from the university or have an idea to actually bring that to fruition in the form of a business. So expanding the services of SCORE and SBDC, which is a small business, I can't DC part, development, thank you. And expanding what they offer, not necessarily having to reinvent the wheel, though a center for entrepreneurship would be pretty neat. But just in terms of getting the low-hanging fruit, seeing if those two organizations that do offer those types of services could be expanded. Those were our ideas.
Fantastic, let's hear it from them. Okay. And group number two, if Silicon Valley Vitality was expanding its leadership and innovation. Somebody want to speak for that group? Great.
I'm Bill Richter, and our group was Art Ramirez, Matt Thompson, Doug Hall, Marilyn Calciano, and Steve Tedesco. So we talked for a bit about what Silicon Valley has been up to, and then we decided we would try to come up with an action item that we would just appropriate to ourselves. And in talking with the dean, as he noted before, there's a ready-made community of gamers on campus, and one of the things that we began to think about was how, if we set for ourselves as a goal, trying to retain and encourage that group of people, that creative class, if you will, to make a 5-year commitment to Santa Cruz, what would be involved in that? What would that look like? And so we decided that what we would do is come up with a way to convene a group of those people and then bring them together with the kinds of community leaders and community organizations that they might like to know actually exist in Santa Cruz. What Art Ramirez was saying is that this particular group of people are interested in the local culture, the local industries, knowing what the community is all about, what the nightlife is, the kinds of things that would appeal to them in their generation and in their professional capacity. So we're thinking that what we would like to do is, maybe with the help of the university, convene a group of those people to ask them what is important to them in a community, but also at the same time to introduce them to people in the community that they might not know. And so we could have representatives from the city, from Plantronics, from other parts of the university, from the arts, maybe from Kumbwa, maybe from a couple of different cultural and artistic organizations, the kinds of things that feed the creativity of this group of people, and find out what they would like, and just go from there. So those were Roaring Thoughts.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bill. Okay, we can hear from the group on Branded as an Innovative Community. All right, Willie.
Hi, Willie, Second Harvest. I'm kind of back here in the corner. So, it's really the key operative word here was brand. How do you build strong brand, consistency and repetitiveness? One of our biggest challenges is that we have dozens and dozens of extraordinary things we do, which means we're never consistent on our message. So building that consistent, repetitive message, have everybody on message. Message has to be grassroots, not just leadership. Just people talking about what's awesome about Santa Cruz. The second thing was just purposeful. What is some of the most critical purposes? And one of the most critical purposes we said is really attracting and retaining, the right young creative talent that we need to become that innovative capital. How do we attract, Stanford, Silicon Valley, et cetera, but really be real clear about who, what, and why when we're thinking about our marketing campaign. The third point we talked a lot about was buzz. How do you create buzz? And part of it is right buzzwords, vitality. You don't talk about growth, you talk about vitality. You talk about creativity. Boulder's talked a lot about quality of life. We need to be consistent about those. Videos. We talked about, there again, turning great ideas into great realities for the Santa Cruz region. And then the last thing we talked about was leadership. It's just the recognition that at a certain point, there's the decision that the time is now to really jump in and invest, which really requires strong leadership. And, the question was, who's going to be the brand manager to really drive this? So.
Great, thank you. All right, let's hear it for that group. Okay, then if funding of UCSC was expanding.
All right, thank you. Martin Bernal with the City of Santa Cruz. Donna was our expert, and I'm not an expert on it, so I'll see if I get this right. Obviously, Donna mentioned that having more funding opportunities, specifically from research grants and contract revenue, would be a tremendous thing, and it's really vital to the success of a research university. It's essentially the lifeblood, and which has been a challenge more recently as public sector funding has decreased, and the challenge with the state budget and university budgets in recent years. So they're now looking at moving more to trying to obtain more private sector funding. But that in order for the university to be successful in its mission and to accomplish with some of the things we've seen some heard about today, that research and grant revenue has to expand over the future. But we also talked about the fact that there are opportunities now, nonetheless, and she mentioned earlier in her talk about focusing on particular areas like genomics and gaming, as Art mentioned as well, that we could focus on and try to expand our opportunities there. Organics. So while the revenue base has been declining, I think we thought that there's opportunities and that hopefully would be increasing, and that we really need to focus on that.
I think the final point is that as these grow, the support for that on campus also grows. Because if you have vibrant enterprises, they want to support that infrastructure back on campus. So to have a really healthy, dynamic campus, the stronger the economic base in the region is, it'll feed each other.
Thanks. Thank you to this group. Great. And then let's turn our attention to the competitive quality of infrastructure. Who's going to report after this group?
Hi. So we actually focus kind of on process. We thought that infrastructure means the kind of thing that would make people and businesses say they wanted to be in Santa Cruz. Like it's an advantage to be in Santa Cruz. You want to be here because we've got such great support in the infrastructure. But the big thing that we were talking about is the process, because everybody has to agree on what do you want. What do you want? Infrastructure is a big deal. It's expensive and it's a lot of times permanent or almost permanent. So how do you get everybody to agree? We like Darren's idea of starting, because it's good to start somewhere. So to start with having by having our own, like, inside, let's visit each other and present to each other and kind of get our story straight. And we're thinking that when we saw the three parts of the triangle, that was the university, the business community, and the government, that we need to have it as a goal to engender more trust among those three parts, because that's what helps us agree and not get into all these quarrels, and get into these eddies, I think somebody said, that prevent this, the flow. So that's a huge part of it, and so that's one idea to get people working together. But if we are working together better, I think our community is able to do investment and able to have some good infrastructure.
Great, thank you to that group. Okay, and then let's turn our attention to success in attracting startup capital.
Hello, I'm Helen Mesloka, and I am a transplant from Boston of about 14 months. What's called, I think one would go to prison really for this adjective, a serial entrepreneur. I've raised over $327 million. I guess I have raised $327 million exactly for startup companies in Boston and also in the Boulder area, where I have lived for 4 months temporarily, and I'm on the board of a company in Westminster, which is a suburb of Boulder. Our group came up with these considerations. First off, a message has to have something behind it, and that message means that when we have to build quality. There has to be a strong university in order to attract venture capital and get them interested, and at least very, very strong programs, competitive nationally and internationally. I mean, one needs to think internationally today. Can't just think in terms of Silicon Valley or Boulder or anyone else. One needs to really think broader than that. And there could be the other thought on a broad level is that we don't really know what the people in Santa Cruz really have in them to do, right? We don't. And I was amazed in talking to a friend in the last 2 weeks who's involved in something called the Massachusetts Challenge. And this is now a group of at least 300 companies that have come together because there's been a lot of money that has been put together through foundations. And these are entrepreneurial foundations, so individuals who have set up foundations for grants. So there are going to be over, I think, 50 grants of between $1 million and $50,000, and there's going to be 15 grants of $1 million. Now, this is grants, this is not equity. So venture capitalists also will begin to look at these companies, because if it's not, this doesn't qualify as a first round of capital, it'll qualify for second round of capital or whatever. And so what I think we're saying is that there needs to be a boot camp for packaging these companies up. There are 1 million or more, an infinite number of great ideas, but being able to really put together the company is a whole other factor. So there needs to be a team of people around a founder who has the stuff and the idea and the patents and anything else that goes along with it to be able to make this idea happen. And in 2010, when Mass Challenge started, it wasn't what it was today, which is only 3 years. So I suggest to you that we do something like that. Our group suggests. There is definitely support for the gaming industry. A big difference that wasn't mentioned with Boulder is that Massachusetts is a hell of a terrible state to do business versus Colorado, which has incredible tax incentives, property taxes, etc. And there is affordable housing. Westminster, a beautiful 4-bedroom house, costs $162,000. I looked that up on Realtor.com last night. There needs to be really good tech transfer. I served on the science committee of Brandeis University, and there is a wonderful product that many of you, I bet, use. I can't mention it, but the patent was written poorly. And so there's an issue with getting quality work done in the tech transfer department and having people that are involved in basic science see themselves as entrepreneurs. It's a very different thing, and I've been there. I know what it's like to try to convince a researcher that, hey, you've got something, let me take this and work it into a real product. That's a different kettle of fish. yes, I've got one or two more points. Competition for the pool of startup money should also engage a 10 to 20-year plan. There's no reason why Monterey Bay can't have a private university that's an A university as well as a public university. There's no reason why we can't have a medical school. You need more medical schools. And that will generate a whole lot of other things. And those are our thoughts. So what a venture capitalist looks for is it looks for the energy and the ideas and the ability to execute on those ideas. And that's what I believe we need to create.
Great, let's hear it for that table. Great. Okay, Santa Cruz was successful in creating jobs. You got it?
I got the notes on my phone here, so I'm gonna step in the shade so I can read them. Well, first, there remains a lot of scattered energy that needs to be focused on. So I think that was one of the things that the group felt needed to be brought to everybody's attention. There's a lot of ideas out there, but there's still focus that's necessary. We need to still work to find consensus on which industries we can rally behind. You know, both Boulder and Fort Collins and down in San Luis Obispo all picked. That's not going to be easy. We need to make sure that the branding is supported with substance to making work easier to get done. I think we've all thought that our economic vitality would just happen because Santa Cruz is a great place to live. And the reality of it is that we're competing against other communities for those jobs and those industries, and the ocean and the vibe alone isn't going to create a win for us. It's a nice advantage for sure. So we need to demonstrate to existing employers that they have the opportunity to grow here, that they have what's necessary to grow here, and that we're a great place to attract employers because not only are we a great place to live, but we're a great place where work can get done well. And then, you know, lastly, there did seem to be support in the group for the conversation about supporting primary employers. Those are the employers that have nationwide and worldwide markets that are doing business right here in the community, and how can we help those folks add jobs and grow. And then lastly, this is just my add-on. It seems like, based upon the data and the businesses we would want to attract, high-end broadband is a key infrastructure component of that to move forward.
Okay, and finally, UCSC technology transfer.
Thanks, Peter. Joe Foster, Business Council. We had a great group over here and had a really nice, lively discussion. I want to frame it really quickly and actually read exactly what Group 8 was working on. And that's UCSC technology transfer efforts were successful at commercializing the research being done at UCSC. So our group, we talked about what that would look like and what our community would look like if that were the case. And while there are some successes that have already started, we felt like the first step and the first thing this community would look like is that we would be further down the path that we've already started on as far as private sector, public sector, educational community all coming together and getting on the same page and trying to work closely together. And I think looking around at this group here, you can tell that that's well on its way. The second part of it was that we thought that the community would look a lot like the models that we saw in Fort Collins and in Boulder, and the fantastic infrastructure that they have set up around their technology transfer from UC Boulder and from CSU, and how they've embraced and how the private sectors work so closely with them to help provide mentoring and guidance for this technology and these companies that are growing from the university. So we were talking about just the aspect of looking more like those models, maybe not exactly like them, but taking some elements that we've seen successful here and elements that we're seeing successful elsewhere. And the third part of it was that we felt that if this were 100% set in stone, that all of us here would be looking at a different idea of economic development here in Santa Cruz County. And instead of sort of looking at an old school idea of trying to attract retail development and big box stores, and maybe we can get a 500 to 1,000 employee company to move here, taking a look closely at what we have and what's growing here up on the hill here in our community, growing it, hiring students that are graduating from UCSC and Cabrillo, providing these jobs to local people, supporting local companies that are trying to grow here, establish themselves here, and keep them here. So we feel that this is in the near future and that we're on the right path. Did I forget anything? Do you want to say something?
Hi, my name is Allison Ruday. One of the things we talked about was creating, and we've heard the common theme actually throughout all the presentations today, is creating that boot camp, that infrastructure, that team that brings the IP that's coming out of the universities, as well as the knowledge and the wisdom and the know-how from Silicon Valley and other, very successful areas of the country and the globe. And I definitely agree with Helen. We should be thinking internationally, not just locally over the hill. We tend to that whole over-the-hill thing, we seem to be dependent on them, and we shouldn't be. There's a whole nation and a whole globe that is available to us, and bringing all those people together. One of the other things we talked about was when you bring these groups together, I think you talked about it just a little bit, there's this concept of how do you get everybody on the same page? How do you deal with the concern of what's in it for me? Because that's the first barrier when you bring these groups together, is they want to know, what am I going to get for it? How am I going to benefit? And that's just a psychological issue that needs to be addressed. So finding a way to bring these incubation teams together, first addressing that issue, getting that off the table, and then bringing this great, incredible intelligence and intellectual property owners and knowledge together, along with the wisdom of how to create companies, how to take them from incubator style to all the way to, a public company or beyond. So, it's addressing all the different levels that oftentimes we don't address, and we start trying to crash all these things together and push our ideas on each other, and it never gets addressed because the barrier is you haven't addressed that we're all thinking together. So that was the last part of it. Thank you.
Okay, let's hear it for that group. Okay, so a lot of great overlapping ideas and a number of amazing ideas that popped up. So, there's next steps that have to happen, and I'm sure when Bill is back, he will help organize and move things forward. But let me just hand it back to Martina for close.
As part of those next steps, if you all who presented especially would be able to jot down some of your notes and get them to the chamber, that's going to be a jumping point for us to continue this conversation. I know we're over time, so I just want to say thanks to each and every one of you who came today to begin this conversation. This is not the end, certainly, and we also want to thank Amanda for her good work with the chamber. Bill is off on a personal matter, but she did a great job. So thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the afternoon and enjoy. Thanks.
Yeah, there we go.